Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us today.
Welcome back, everyone. Our topic today is on-farm research and the eFields report. We like to do an episode on eFields each winter after it's released, and the 2023 report is now live. So it's exciting to see all of our research converge in one place and share those results out. So, Elizabeth, if you can give us a summary of the 2023 report, what did we have in it this year?
Another great year. We talked with Aaron as the season progressed, and we saw some unique conditions like we always do in 2023. So it's neat to see how our yields across the state looked in general. Overall, things looked pretty good, and we learned a lot about how some of our management practices that we're trying out perform in those more unique conditions like that dry spring we had, and as we finished up a little more normal for the year. We ended the report with 184 trials coming from 47 Ohio counties, so pretty exciting. We had some of our old favorites that we've had for the last several years repeated in there, including the soil health survey and some of our seeding rate and nitrogen rate trials like that. This year we saw a big jump in the number of trials we had looking at different biologicals. So I know that's been a hot topic around the state. So if that's something you're interested in, we've got some results there that you can dig into in the report this year. Technology is really coming on strong. We saw a big jump. Another topic that really emerged this year as popular was things related to drones, whether that's trying to use drones to spray pesticides or apply cover crops. So some new and emerging technologies that you can learn more about as well.
Well, also joining us today are a couple of our core contributors who usually have a decent amount of trials in eFields year after year. So welcome to Wayne Dellinger, educator in Union County, and Nick Eckel, educator in Wood County. You guys want to tell us a little bit about how you got started and your involvement with eFields? Go ahead, Wayne.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. Appreciate that. So when I started as a county educator in Union County, I kind of took a year to kind of get acclimated and get my name out in the community and develop some relationships with the area farmers. And then the following winter, I sat down with a few of them and discussed some of the protocols that we had available to possibly line up some research with those farms. I started kind of easy with some seeding rate trials in soybeans, and it kind of just evolved over the years after that into some other studies.
Thanks, Wayne. And Nick, what's your experience been like?
Yeah, I guess originally I started right in the middle of the pandemic, so it was interesting trying to build relationships initially. I was fortunate enough to have my family farms and started doing some research with my brothers on the eField sides of things the first year. We kind of worked together on that, but then that kind of grew, got comfortable doing some protocols, built some relationships the following year, and kind of reached out, asked questions to growers, trying to figure out what their interests were and what their questions were, I guess, per se, to what they were trying to find. One thing I really try to encourage as you go out to farms is, we need to be conducting research, whether you're used to it or not. We need to be testing something, learning something every year on our farm. And I think eFields is a great way to publish it for extension, but also take that experience and put it in the hands of our growers so that they can conduct that year in, year out as well. And I've seen our growers or producers that I've worked with do some replicated trials, learn how to do that, take that data and actually come back to me and talk a little bit, even if we didn't publish it this year, but we've talked about how to set some stuff up for them if they want to do that as well. It's been fun. I think we're advancing every single year on trying to do more and more and looking at different questions that we have as an ag community.
Yeah, you mentioned that communicating the results and sharing them back out. I think that's probably one of the most fun parts for me is seeing that learning community. Amanda, in your county, you do a really awesome job of bringing a group of farmers together that are curious about the research and want to test things out. And sometimes I learn the most from sitting in the room with that group of farmers and everybody's just bouncing ideas around, trying to explain, why did we see this yield difference here but not here? And that's where progress in agriculture is made, is figuring out how those pieces of the puzzle fit together. And I'm always excited that farmers are willing to collaborate with us with these eFields projects, and we can all learn together.
Yeah, I think you developed a nice community here for us, Elizabeth. I mean, I know it's not all on you, but you certainly spearheaded it, and we're thankful for that. Nick, why don't we start with you talking about some of the trials you've conducted over the years? Xyway was a big one last year. A lot of us had Xyway trials, and you did as well. So what did you find with that particular study?
Yeah, so I had a producer who was looking at, I guess, how is Xyway going to work into their system, right? He was doing a mid-season V7, V8 application of fungicide, coming back and then spraying in the R stages as well, R1 at VT, and trying to look at tar spot and how that all played in effect with it. And his question was, is this good enough where I can just plant it on the ends of my field? So if I got sprayers that want to go and run in the middle of the season, they don't have to do the perimeter. They just come in and go efficiency wise. I think we found some pretty cool results. At the end of the day, with using Xyway, the question we had going into it was, does it last long enough throughout the growing season? Number one, with as much rain that we have, we know that its usability may diminish over time, and its effectiveness may diminish over time as we get later into the growing season. In 2022, we conducted this, and Xyway alone really did a really good job of holding its own in both studies, and we did it at two different sites, and it actually yielded 2 bushel higher than the other ones. We didn't see a statistical difference between any of the sites, but we did see a little bit like that. One thing that we did do was we came back out and we took ratings at VT and at R1 at those stages. Then we came back at R6 time frame to see when the tar spot started to move in and how that held up. So we did a control, we did a Xyway, and we had Xyway plus foliar application at R1. The initial results were that the Xyway plus foliar were definitely the cleanest as far as disease control when we looked at gray leaf spot, northern corn leaf blight, and also tar spot control at the end of the day. So we didn't see, like I said, we didn't see a statistical difference on yield, but we did see a big difference in controlling the diseases up front and keeping those plants healthy up front. I think one thing that when we start talking about tar spot and what we want to do with tar spot is we want to have a very healthy plant going into reproductive stage. We know that tar spot in northern Ohio likes to set in a little bit later in the season. So if we can have a healthy plant that's going to be able to defend itself and get us through the milk stages of the corn cycle, we should be able to hold on to those bushels and get us to the end of the growing season pretty well.
Yeah. So Nick, you also have dove into looking at some trials with nitrogen. Do you want to describe those in a little detail as well?
Yeah, so we did a nitrogen rate trial last year. First, we interseeded red clover with a producer in a wheat, and the year before had that over winter, come back, terminated that prior to planting about a week and a half before planting. And we were just basically looking at what were our nitrogen credits through using that legume cover crop, and can we reduce our overall nitrogen input in that growing season. And so we did treatments of 90 pounds of nitrogen, 175 units of nitrogen, and 250 units of nitrogen. We did see a statistical difference in the study, and it was kind of eye-opening at that time about our efficiency that we were seeing in our nitrogen. And if we start talking about nitrogen rates and what our uses would be, so if we have a 1-to-1, so 1 pound of nitrogen per 1 pound or to 1 bushel of corn, we've seen the efficiency with that cover crop was still around that 175 units of nitrogen that we use. We gained about 25 to 30 bushel per acre at that time. So we have a rough estimate that we maybe got 30 pounds of nitrogen out of that cover crop that year as well.
And that's definitely, I think, one of the emerging areas of research that we're going to see more of in eFields in the future. I know Amanda's partnering on a project where we're looking at nitrogen rate after a cover crop and lining that up with different seeding rates. A lot of farmers have questions about that. So, really excellent research that you're contributing there, Nick.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah, switching over to you, Wayne, you've been really more on the technology side with some of your trials here in recent years. Do you want to talk about some of the work you've been doing?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Looking again, I said I started out with the seeding rate trials and kind of starting out easy, and then looking over the protocols. And a couple years after that, came across a study that was done at OSU farms with high-speed planters, and had a relative that's got a similar unit that they'd been using for a year or so, and I approached them about doing a study with different speeds in planting soybeans because they plant their soybeans on 30-inch rows, so they use the same planter for corn and soybeans. So we kind of set up a study for that. And that same year, which was 2021, was talking with one of my other cooperators, and in our discussions that winter prior to the planting season, I talked about one of these studies that I had ready to go and lined up, and they said, well, we've got the same planter. And I said, well, how about we do it in corn with you? And they said, we'd be happy to, because we don't think we really use our equipment to its full capacity, even though we've got it. So that worked out well. It definitely was a benefit to them and to our research. So in 2021, did planter speeding rate trials for corn and soybeans with two different farms. And these were rates of 5 mile per hour, 7.5, 10, and 12. Now, these planters that we're using were John Deere ExactEmerge planters, and they were only rated up to 10 mile per hour, but we still pushed them a little bit, and it got a little bit out of the comfort zone for one farmer more than the other, but we still pushed them a little bit. And for corn and beans both, we really did not see a difference in emergence or yield among the four treatments, which was a little bit of a surprise. We saw a little bit of variability, but when you compared 5 mile per hour to 12, which were the two ends of the spectrum, there really was no statistical difference. Long range studies would be good to see as far as wear and tear on the equipment and that sort of thing. We were able to put together a quality second year trial on the soybeans, pretty much with the same results. The corn in the second year was a little bit more of a challenge because that was in a no-till field, and we just really didn't have enough horsepower in the tractor to get up to that 12 miles per hour. But again, it was research that the farmers needed, and I talked with the ones with the corn planter that had not been really pushing it too much, and I've done work with them every year since, and talking with them, they are planting at faster speeds now, especially with weather conditions and so forth. So they saw a direct benefit to the research that we did. And we always try to stress that this is research for my purposes. This is research that's going on in Union County for Union County farmers, Union County soils, Union County data to keep locally and get local answers. The other study that I did for the first time this year was a phosphorus uptake study in corn. And this was something, again, I was sitting there over the winter and I, said, this is a protocol I really haven't looked that close at, but this one's here too. And they're like, we're doing something very similar to that anyway, so let's put our heads together and put a uniform protocol together. So we did that, and it was looking at impact of phosphorus when applied as a starter fertilizer and how its uptake in the plant affects the yields in corn. And so they put on a 10-34-0 rate at 7.5 gallons per acre at planting, and this was on a 3x3 system liquid placement at planting. And we took tissue samples at V4 and analyzed those for phosphorus uptake. And the weather is always the one variable that we can't control too much. It was very dry between planting and V4 for these samples to be taken. So we really are deducing that it affected the amount of phosphorus that was taken up to the plants, because we really didn't realize any difference statistically in the amount of phosphorus that was taken up by the plants in the no starter plots versus the starter plots. However, at the end of the growing season, when we took the harvest data, we did see a statistical difference of 10 bushel to the acre higher yields for those plots that used the starter 1034-0 over the ones that had no starter fertilizer. So definitely this was one snapshot in time for this study, and looking forward to hopefully a year two for this to try to keep the data set intact and keep comparisons over time.
I think those studies on starter fertilizer, especially with phosphorus, are always interesting when you think about how phosphorus works in the soil and, availability and nutrient needs and things like that. It's good to have that information out there.
Amanda, you've also got a lot of trials going on in Madison County. Do you want to talk about a few of the ones you conducted this year?
Sure. I got into a couple different trials this year, which was certainly interesting. We're working on a larger grant with a few people around the state. Well, Wayne's included on that grant, looking at Bavaria bassiana, and that's more for treating cover crop seed. But through those discussions, we learned that there'd been some trials showing it helped with disease control in corn. So one farmer here in Madison was interested in treating his seed with that and seeing what we found. And we did have vomitoxin in that field at the end of the season. Unfortunately, there was not a statistical difference in DON levels. We did find a statistical difference with the abbreviation is ZEA. It's not a very common one that we talk about. There has been some studies out there that it might impact reproduction and things like that. But as far as the DON one, where we're really the one that we're typically concerned with, we didn't see a statistical difference there. But I think there's still some things to learn from this product. And like I said, we have a larger study going on looking at it in cover crops. So we'll see what we find out in the future with that. And then another one that was a little bit different was looking at treating soybeans with a deer repellent. This one we did at Farm Science Review. If you're familiar with the lay of the land there, there's Deer Creek running through there. There's an 80-acre woods. So there's a lot of deer pressure. We treated double crop soybeans with plant skid, which is sold as a vertebrate deterrent. And unfortunately, we didn't see a yield difference in this treatment either. I think it was interesting to see how much the deer really fed on the soybeans. We had exclusion cages out there, and the soybeans within the exclusion cages were about twice as tall as the ones outside of that area. A couple of things I have been thinking about with this one is maybe the feeding just occurred too soon. They're out there nibbling on these soybeans as soon as they come out of the ground. And with a soybean and your growing point being at the top of the plant, that's certainly going to have a long-term impact. And this product, it works off of smell as much as like taste. So I wonder if we applied it right away, even though there's not much plant material there, you could get it onto the ground and the odor would be there, if it would have any difference there, rather than trying it as really a recovery product is kind of what it was, because they'd already been feeding on it by the time we applied, when there was significant plant growth to make that happen at V3.
Definitely interesting trials and very relevant. I know anybody that's got a field that's got trees around it knows how destructive deer can be in a hurry. So looking at ways to keep them off of our beans, I think, is a worthwhile endeavor. So to switch gears a little bit, you guys know, as soon as we put out the 2023 report, we're all in the background starting to plan for 2024. And now that the calendar is turned to January, it's time to plan our trials. So what are you guys most excited about for trial topics looking at 2024?
So yeah, in Union County, the projects that I'm excited about for 2024, definitely year two on the phosphorus uptake study in corn. Had the farmers actually approach me not too long ago and ask what we have cooking for this year. So they're excited. I'm excited. Hopefully we can make a year two work out for that study and get some more data in the set for phosphorus uptake in corn. The other ones that I would like to have a redo at were two studies that got rained out in the spring of 2023. They were in the ground. One was comparing seed treatments with soybeans. We had two different seed treatments that we were doing. And actually within that study, we had another study that was comparing starter fertilizer in soybeans. Again, both of those got rained out and they got replanted to corn. So we did not get any data off of those studies, but those are what I have definitely in the queue for this year, hopefully, and always looking for options for more with other cooperators.
In Wood County, I think in 2024, still the hot topic, I think, is tar spot timing. When are we going to spray our fungicides? How are we going to spray our fungicides? And what's most effective? I had producers that have put on with helicopters, planes, with drones, with ground rigs, different types of nozzles and different applications. But I still think the timing portion is what's key. Going to try to get a producer lined up that wants to do more of a timing effect on seeing what pays and what's most effective on that. If we can continue to do a Xyway trial, I think that's still something that is a great tool in the toolbox for some growers if they have the capability of doing that. And also, I think on the soybean side of things, I'm going to piggyback what Wayne said about some soybean treatments. And we have heavy Phytophthora issues up here in our heavy clays in Wood County, and always seems to be an issue going into spring if we get a heavy rain. So still comparing some of those seed treatments, I think would be pretty beneficial too for a lot of our growers up here.
That's great. I love hearing all the ideas come in. And for any of our listeners who are curious about on-farm research, you can keep an eye on the corn newsletter as we move through spring. I know looking at the protocols that we're starting to develop and fine tune now, cover crops are going to be a big one moving forward. If you've got fields that are cover cropped and want to understand what that's doing with your weed seed bank, we've got a trial looking at weed suppression by cover crops. We need fields that have been cover cropped and fields that haven't. Potassium is another one where opportunities are going to come up to better understand how that's available in season and what our applications could look like to be more efficient with that. And again, I say this every year, but the sky's the limit. So if there's questions you need answered, we can help design the trial that gets those answers and moves your operation forward.
Thank you, Wayne and Nick, for sharing your trials with us and contributing to eFields over the years. Really looking forward to what we'll learn in the future. And for those of you who have not looked at eFields yet, we'll put a link to the website and also to it in the knowledge exchange where you can kind of sort through the reports in a different way over the various years. So we'll put those in the show notes and be sure to check it out.
Thanks for listening to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next episode.
Hey, podcast listeners. Just a reminder to give us a like or subscribe so you know when we release new episodes. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to leave us a review also. We appreciate the comments.